Hi all, welcome back to the Smart Garden at Rom Yen House. Today we're going to be working on this pile of second-hand, rough, old reclaimed timber. It's full of holes, old screws, rusty nails, and with the help of this naughty little fella supervising, we will be turning it into a rough, sawn-styled, solid workbench. Let's charge right in. One of our main aims for the Smart Garden is to live a more sustainable lifestyle with as little impact as possible on the environment. Hence why we chose to use recycled timber for this project. It's worth noting that this old recycled timber had over its lifetime collected hundreds of rusty old nails, screws, joist hangers, all sorts of bits and bobs. Before we could start, we needed to remove as much of these as possible. And it does take considerable time, guys. The nails are old, rusty, bend easily and break off. It's great to use beautiful old timber like this, but it's easily double the time taken to build this workbench. Just bear that in mind. Sometimes you hit the nail trying to drive it back through the wood and it just bends. One technique I found out worked most of the time was to cut the nail a lot shorter with an angle grinder before trying to drive it out of the wood. Then use a pair of pincers to grab the small shard of nail to remove it. Most of the time this worked on the difficult cases. Now that we've removed 99% of the nails, the next stage was to build two side frames for the workbench. A quick comment here, if you're looking for a master carpenter or quality cabinet maker, then this video isn't for you. I'm not and do not pretend to be a quality woodworker, just a barely functional one, so please bear that in mind when you see all the mistakes I'm about to make. The first stage here is to cut the two top side rails for the bench. These are both 2 meter long 2x4s. And for the lower side rails, I took an 8x1 plank and ripped it in half to form roughly two 4x1 planks. This is me ripping the 8" by 1" plank into two planks of wood. As you can see, Rudy is carefully holding the end of the plank of wood for me and supervising. The next shot is something I haven't really tried before on a radial chop saw, and that is to produce a half lap joint. Honestly, in this instance, I'm not sure it improves the bench much, or if at all. I found it very difficult to produce clean results, and actually one of the joints was pretty bad. It's easier to rough cut and take more time to finish this with a decent sharp chisel. They work okay, but I was pretty disappointed with how well these came out for me. It's not the tools, it's just a lot more practice is needed on my behalf, I suspect. To put the sides together, I glued the half-lap joints and then put one screw through each joint. After that, I squared up every joint before adding more screws to lock the side panels together. It's normal to measure diagonals to make sure your piece is square, but I found that quite difficult to do. I used a normal steel square and checked each joint before screwing it together, and then overall checked it afterwards. It's not perfect by any means, but it was surprisingly square and functional. It's definitely not going to win any master cabinet makers competitions, but it's okay. So here you can see the side frames all completed and ready for the next stage. This next part of the process is a little bit sketchy as I didn't have any large clamps to temporarily hold things together. To get around this, I basically did the same as I did when putting the side frames together. I temporarily screwed in one of the shorter top shelf planks at each end and then squared the whole structure up as best I could before adding more screws. I then did exactly the same process for the bottom shelves. I added a plank at each end and checked the whole structure to make sure it was square. Surprisingly, and I'm not sure if this is just luck or poor quality control standards, but it looks pretty okay to me. To finish the top shelf, it was then just a case of cutting each plank to size and screwing it down to the side frame rails. The final piece of the top shelf had to be cut to exactly the right size and then sanded a little to fit. Because this wood was recycled, it was covered in all sorts of old paint marks, concrete, and all sorts of junk. In order to clean it up and to go with the rough-sawn look, I just took a rough sandpaper grinding wheel to the whole piece, cleaned it up a treat. There's one final piece I put in to give it more strength, and that is an 8 by 1 inch cross piece at each end. This definitely helps the overall strength of the workbench. And here's the final glamour shot for the piece. It's functional, strong, and it's probably going to outlive me. One of the main philosophies for the smart garden is to be as sustainable as possible, and this kind of project reusing old recycled wood really resonates with that approach. If you like this kind of content and want to see more of this style, please do comment below. A huge thanks as ever to Sarah and Om for donating the wood and all the support that they give. If you've got this far in the video, thank you very much for your support. Take care, guys.